O'Brien.
Hi, how are you, Connie?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm
Thank
just
you.
elated.
I'm just imagining right now that there's an incredible amount of excitement and applause, and I'm just creating that in my own mind because I hear absolutely nothing. So, if you don't mind, right now in my imagination, it's a standing ovation, and people are just going nuts. So, please, everyone, take your seats. Please.
Yes, sit, please, everybody. But honestly, it's so surreal to see you sitting here because I've watched so much of your material over the years, but including during this very strange chapter in all of our lives, and I'm half expecting like Jim Gaffigan's face to appear on another screen.
Yeah, exactly. No, I spend an inordinate amount of time with comedians and very strange people. So it's nice. It's nice to talk to someone who you seem relatively normal compared to the most people I talk to.
I'm not really, but Conan, I have to say, all kidding aside, your podcast has been sort of, a lifesaver. Maybe that's overstating a little bit, but I've loved it so much during this period of time. It's kept me laughing, it's kept me sane. I just wondered, at what point did you start taking podcasts really seriously? And I guess at what point did you sort of realize that your kind of visual brand of comedy actually translated very well into an audio format?
I have to be honest, like most of the best things in my life, the success of the podcast was a complete surprise. I had no expectations for the podcast. When someone on my team pitched the idea that I do a podcast, I thought, well, that's crazy. I'm on television. It didn't make sense to me. It felt a little like, why would I try and get into radio if I've gotten to this point? But I think I'm very fortunate in that, or I have a quality that has served me well, which is I like to try things. I'm curious, so I thought I'd try it, and almost immediately the podcast became a massive success. And the most important thing to me is I realized how much I love doing it. I really love it, and it's still me, and it's still my sense of humor that's been out there between The Simpsons or The Late Night Show or Saturday Night Live for 30 some odd years. But the difference is that this is the Conan that lives in the writer's room. This is the Conan that really lets his left brain go. This is how I am with my friends and my family. This is what I'm like when I've had more than 3 glasses of wine. And this is a Conan that it really gets to run free. And there's something about this format that fits me like a glove. So I immediately saw that how exciting this was, and I loved it. So I won't lie to you, though. I didn't have, if you had told me, the cool thing to say to everybody at TechCrunch, Disrupt, would be to act like Mr. Burns and say it was all part of my master plan. But it wasn't. Like so many things in my life, whether it's a good comedy idea or it's a nice turn in my career, it's been an accident. And it's just that I was willing to follow my curiosity.
Well, your love of what you're doing really shines through. And I feel like, even though, again, I've been a fan for so many years, I feel that, like millions of other people, I know you much better than I did in your format as a talk show host. Is it okay to ask, do you prefer it to your TV show? It almost seems that you do.
Yeah, there are a couple of things about doing a podcast that I prefer that are superior or feel more fun than doing a talk show. The conversations, when I'm doing the traditional talk show, I'm limited. You have to take, for years and years and years, when it was just on network television, I had to take 6 and 7 minute turns, which means I'm having a conversation with you, or I'm having a conversation with someone I've always dreamed of talking to, whether it's a Tom Hanks or a Jim Carrey or, a Robin Williams. And then when I see that after 6 minutes or 7 minutes, there needs to be a laugh, and then I have to say, we'll take a break and we'll get right back. Mm-hmm. And then there's a band plays, and 3 minutes later we come back and I pick it up. That is not a natural conversational flow. And so, to be honest, what you can do in a podcast is really incredible. I can talk to someone for an hour. I can talk to them for an hour and 15 minutes, try and trim them back. But for the most part, people let their guard down. The other thing I prefer, no hair and makeup. So, and it sounds like I'm kidding, but after almost 30 years of people caking my very white face with makeup so that I look like I'm still alive, I love not having to do that. And I just, and so there's a lot of things that are, that feel new. And at this stage in my career, this is my philosophy is stay curious, keep moving and keep finding something that makes you feel like you're 25 years old. And that's what this podcast has been for me. It's been a lot of discovery, a lot of joy, and a lot of creative satisfaction.
That's terrific. Well, you know, a lot of what we've been talking about this week at Disrupt is sort of how the pandemic in ways has accelerated certain things. Of course, lots of things have suffered greatly, which is terrible. But I'm just wondering if, your listenership has sort of accelerated in a way, or because you're now doing your show and sometimes using those same guests and turning that into a podcast, more people have discovered the podcast, or if there's been sort of benefits for you in the sort of synergistic world that you've created.
I would say, the biggest, I was thinking about this, that years and years and years ago, when I was a writer on Saturday Night Live, the head writer at the time, Jim Downey, he looked at me, this was years before I had my talk show, he said, "You're funny when you react. The way you react to things is funny." And I realized over the years when I had the talk show that I could have prepared jokes and I could have prepared shtick and prepared bits, and they could be quite good or not, but they could be good. But what the audience really loved was seeing me react in the moment. So if I had a guest who embarrassed me, just seeing my uptight Catholic stare of embarrassment and the camera pushing in would get the biggest laugh of the night. I realized that I think my strength is reacting in the moment to what's happening. And so that has helped me a lot in my career. That is my sort of my comedic, I think, tool. But then when you take it, and it's why I was improv, I always loved improvisation more than stand-up. But if you expand that, you see that it's really reacting to things happening in my career, good, bad, things happening in the world, reacting in the moment. I think that's what got us to the podcast. That's what got us to Team CoCo 10 years ago during the whole Tonight Show madness. We reacted. I reacted in the moment and very honestly, I think, but also created new opportunities by doing that. And that's where we are now is the pandemic. You're watching everybody react. You're watching, and I mean, I have two children. I have a 14-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. My son, by the way, is what his dream would be to be part of this conference because he is an incredible, he codes, he's been programming for years. This is what he wants to do. He lives and breathes. He's just Silicon Valley, and everything about this is magical to him. And he's depressed that I'm part of this because he thinks that I'm going to drag the whole thing down and make it uncool. But what you're seeing right now in COVID and during this period of time is people reacting. Everyone's reacting. Students are reacting. Teachers are reacting. Governments are reacting. Moms, dads, everybody's being forced to react to a very difficult situation. And I think what you're seeing in the work that I'm doing is I'm trying to react. I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be optimistic. I'm trying to maintain my silly tone. I'm letting my hair grow to a ridiculous length. I think like all of us, and I think that's very relatable. And I think that's why in this moment, reacting can be very creative. We're all reacting. We're all doing the best we can in this situation. And if this had been any other year, I'd be on stage with you and there'd be a big crowd. This is what we're doing right now. I'm not actually in my house. I broke into someone else's house because I thought someone in this crowd's going to be tracking me. So I broke into Tom Hanks's house. He lives about 2 doors down, and he's asleep. He's asleep late. But we're going to go with this. This is our reality right now. So this is what we're doing. And a lot of creativity comes from that. A lot of inspiration comes from that.
Well, I've not just admired your work, but I also admire you as an entrepreneur. I mean, 10 years ago, you sort of saw, and your team, I know you've got a great team, Adam Sachs, Jeff Ross, Sona, who's, I've had a few exchanges with, and I see actually she's a very good,
She actually is.
strong person.
The joke is that she's not a good assistant, but the sad truth,
She's
and
very good.
sordid truth, is that she's very good and takes very good care of me.
Right.
But don't let that out. No one can ever know that.
It's our secret. But so you've built this company sort of, out of you in some ways over the last decade. And I do wonder, because I'm sure, Variety and Hollywood Reporter are probably watching this too. Do you like what you're doing enough? And do you have enough momentum going that, your TBS contract expires in a couple of years? Do you keep doing the late night show, or like the Kardashians, do you say, I don't need it anymore?
Well, it's funny. I've always patterned myself on the Kardashians.
Very obvious.
I think we're always mentioned in the same sentence, and so I'm just waiting for their mom to tell me what to do. She's the brains. But no, it's funny because I think I know there's a lot of very young people watching right now, and it's hard for them to imagine the world that I came into in 1993 with my talk show. But basically, in those days, you had a talk show and you had it for as long as you could keep it. And then when it was done, whether you were Johnny Carson or some other or Arsenio Hall, or whoever you were, you said, well, farewell. I leave you now. I'm leaving television. Goodbye. And it's been nice seeing you. And then you ascended up into the clouds, and there were sightings of you. And so I used to imagine that would be my career. At some point, I would stop doing the show, and then occasionally there'd be a spotting of me, sort of like Bigfoot. Someone would see me running through the woods, the Pacific Northwest, and they'd say, I think I saw a Conan sighting, and someone else would say, what's a Conan? And say, well, years ago we had a show and there was a talking dog. But what's different now is that I think it's a mistake to think of it as, will you stop doing the show and only do the podcast, or will you, retire and then quietly work on your letters in a shack? I love to create things. I have a lot of energy. I love to try and make people laugh. And so I see all of this converging. I think the message that I would have for everybody watching this TechCrunch Disrupt right now is that people need to open up their minds a little bit, that if I'm making podcasts, it doesn't prohibit me from also maybe doing something. It doesn't have to necessarily be for Turner. It could be for anybody, creating content that's visual. In addition to that, whether it's my travel shows or some other kind of comedy experiment, that can stream, that can be on a network, that can be something that lives, 5 years from now, our entertainment may come in pill form. So I'm open to, and I hope it does. That'd be
so easy.
Fantastic.
I loved it.
Yeah, you could binge The Sopranos. You could just take a whole bottle of Sopranos and then just drink a lot of water, and then and then you just don't eat any red meat for a while. But my point is, I think there are so many. I'm more excited now, and this is going to sound like far-fetched, but I think this is the most excited I've been in my career, because there are so many ways to be creative. There's so many ways to make people laugh, and I enjoy these new opportunities. I think when you're someone who's been around as long as I have, you have a choice. You can be afraid of change, or you can be delighted by it. And I think I just made a decision a long time ago. I choose to be delighted by change. Whatever it is, I'm going to go with it. So whether I continue my show has already morphed so much, but if the show merges with the podcast, if the podcast and the show and the travel shows, they all merge, or they they become, as we say, pill form or a saline solution we put in the eye. I'm up for it. I'm up for giving it a shot as long as it's FDA approved.
Well, you've got so much going on already, so it's interesting to think that maybe the podcast and the show somehow merge. So in addition to your wonderful, wonderful podcast, I've been listening to some of your other properties of Team CoCo. You just started a podcast with Rory Scovel called
Yep.
Dads, which is interesting. I also really love a new podcast of yours called Inside Conan, the important Hollywood podcast with your writers, Jesse
Yeah,
McGaskill.
that's a lot of fun. It has people at first thought it was some sort of pornographic, and it was initially, and then we changed
the
it.
idea.
Inside Conan is my a writer who's been with me forever, Mike Sweeney, and Jesse Gaskell, another writer on the show. She's terrific, and they do this very funny, interesting podcast that takes you behind the scenes. We're also I wanted to work with someone who's as handsome as I am, so we got Rob Lowe on board.
Right.
Because between Kardashians, the other name that comes up with mine all the time is Rob Lowe. So Rob Lowe is doing his podcast, which has been a big success, literally, and he just has taken to it so well. He's a really great raconteur. He knows everybody. He's got great stories. He's an impressionist. And his handsomeness comes through.
It does somehow.
It does. You can hear it. I never thought someone could be handsome on a podcast, and he's proving me wrong.
Yeah.
He really does.
I'm wondering, there must be so many people who want to work with you and so many ideas you have. How do you prioritize these other podcasts, and how do you plan to roll them out? I mean, will there be 20 podcasts by the end of 2021?
Well, I don't want to set a number goal. I think I'm amazed I think it's 2 years, we've rolled out 10 different podcasts, some, a lot of them unscripted, but some scripted ones as well. And I do not have, I'm not sitting around saying, hey, we got to get to 35 podcasts by this point, because I'd like them to be good. I'd like them, my rule, every now and then, and I'm sure some of the TechCrunch people watching are very familiar with this, there's always a person who comes up to you and says, it's time to talk about branding. What's your brand, man? And we got to talk about what's your brand. And I'm always saying the same thing. The brand is me, meaning I'm a person. I'm not perfect, but I'm well as close as you can get. So everyone sit down. Stop cheering and chanting, please. God, this crowd is rowdy. But I always say to them, I like the podcasts to be things that reflect my sense of, I hope, quality. I hope that they reflect some of my ideas about being a decent person. So if there's a great lucrative podcast that was available, but it really didn't reflect what I'm all about, I'm in a nice position where we don't have to do it.
Right.
Or do it under someone else's name and I still get the money. That's really the answer.
Well, I did want to ask you about that. So obviously lots of deals happening. Spotify paying Joe Rogan up to $100 million in a licensing deal, although I don't know if you saw the news. I don't know if that's going so well. I think Spotify's employees are not that excited about some of his material. But my question is, have they approached you? And what if somebody does approach you? Amazon, Apple, everybody's trying to sort of strike exclusives.
Well, I'm it would really depend on what they had to say. I mean, I haven't really given that much of any thought because we've been so busy making this stuff and building. It's been a joy just building this little podcast company, which isn't so little anymore, making my podcast and shepherding these other podcasts. So, I will tell you very honestly, I've worked for a long time. And I wouldn't say I've been frugal, but I haven't been crazy. Mm-hmm. I mostly just invested in theme restaurants and lost it all, which was a mistake. But then I built back. And so I'm in a position where the thing that gets me up in the morning is not how can we make ton of money. What if someone came to me and said, "Look, we have this great deal for you." That could be tempting, but I really want to be creatively satisfied. I want to work with good people. I have no time, and I will. This is a advice I would give to everyone watching. If really try and make it about your happiness index, and it can sound a little corny, but you really do. If you work with people that you respect and you're having a good time and you're laughing several times at least a day in your project, that should be the goal.
Right.
And a lot of times you can do that and sometimes have a lucrative career based on whatever you imagined having in high school.
Sure.
And this is that's what I'm staying focused on. I think the media gets very interested in a big number, and they think, did someone make a big killing? That's something that could happen for us. It could also not happen for us. And I'm much more. I'd much rather be talking to you in a year in person in front of a lot of people in an audience, because I'd like to get. I do believe we're going to get past all of this, and I'd like to come back and do this the right way.
Love
But
it.
I'd like to be able to say, here are the projects that I made since I last saw you, and I really love them, and they really make me happy.
Mhm.
And you would say, oh yeah, I've listened to some of them, and I enjoy them too. That's the idea.
Right, right. By the way, as soon as you said you want to come back next year, everybody back here was like high-fiving, and we're going to
Oh,
try to
I
hold you
will
to that.
happily come next year. I do warn you, and this is for the men primarily. I'm a hugger. I hug for a long time. And, I wear a lot of very cheap cologne.
Right, right.
So
You'll
you
fit
can
right
pick
in,
it
don't
over.
worry.
You've got a year to walk this back.
But so you are the brand, you love what you're doing, but I love too that you really promote the people around you, not just Gorley and Sona, but also a growing spate of rising comics.
Yeah.
When I was listening to Inside Conan, I had listened to an episode where they featured Beth Stelling, who is a really interesting comic from the Midwest, who's wonderful. And I know that you produced or executive produced her show on HBO Max. So can you talk a little bit about that aspect of Team CoCo? So you also have another really great comic, James Veitch, who's hilarious, and you're sort of promoting him. So how does that whole thing work?
Well, we have, I guess one of my dreams was that when I always, and I don't know why, but even at a young age, I used to think, wouldn't it be cool if I got to be an old person? And of course, back then, when I was a kid, I thought an old person was like 38. But now that I'm way past that, and in my early 40s, why are you laughing suddenly?
I'm also in my early 40s.
Well, you look, whatever you're doing is good. And clearly whatever I'm doing, we look like a commercial where you used the
I
right,
use the pills.
you used the right creams. And then I'm the guy who said, I don't need that. And I'm the example of what happens. But no, I used to think it would be really great if later in my career, I've always, very much gotten a lot of energy and inspiration from young people. And it just makes me feel better about life and whatever time we're here. I get a lot of, and I like being around young writers and young creators. And so I always thought it would be nice if the people that I was associated with went on and became big, maybe even bigger than me, although that would be threatening. But if they later said, yeah, Conan helped me, and when maybe I get a shout out at an Emmys or an Oscars, that would just be very fulfilling. And so, there's that old philosophical idea that there's no such thing as a truly selfless act. On a selfish level, I think I do help these people because I get something out of it. I get a lot of excitement and joy and pride. So people like Moses Storm, who we've worked for, who does a show for us that's been terrific. His Moses and Friends show is been online, and it's done really well. And doing these specials, whether it's with a best-selling or a Chris Red, and we have plans to do many more of them. I like the idea of finding young people who have a voice and have real talent and have a great work ethic and saying, how can I help you?
Right.
Which can also be heard as, how can I exploit you? But I really do hope we're helping them. And I think we are.
Conan, I'm not sure how much time we have. Are we out of time, guys? I've been so aware
I shouldn't say this, especially to the people at TechCrunch Disrupt. I've got nothing going today.
Oh God, I wish we could spend another,
I haven't had, so I'm happy just to hang here. If you want me to work the phone?
Yes, that would be terrific. That would be terrific.
People work the phones anymore? Is that...
No, you have to come back because I have a million more questions. I've loved talking to you. It's been such a comically shitty year, and this has been a highlight. So thank you so much for making.
I would ask you to watch the language in the future. It's going out to a lot of children, and I'm
right, exactly. I know. I'm sorry.
at your behavior. This has been a delight. It really has. Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and like I said, you boosted my credibility, my street cred with my 14-year-old massively by even including me for 8 seconds. So thank you for that. He'll go back to hating me in about an hour.
We'll see him in Silicon Valley in another 10 years, I'm sure.
I will not doubt it. Yeah.
Thanks, Conan.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.